Good morning. Can everybody hear me okay? You're all spread across the entire room, and I have to tell you something. I have to be very honest. I redid my entire presentation at midnight last night, which means that I'm a little bit nervous because I'm not sure that I remember it in quite the correct order. So it's very important for me to make sure that I have a lot of engagement. It's actually a little bit participative. If we were in Japan, I'd ask you to all stand up and start doing jumping jacks. And I need to warn you, I sound, which country do you think I'm from? This is the participative part, right? This is where you start yelling. Where? Germany, Canada, yes, I'm French, right? You can absolutely tell by my accent that I'm a fluent Frenchman that lived in the United States and grew up in Buenos Aires. My first language was Spanish, lived in Japan for a little bit of time, and now I have the British sarcasm with dry French wit. Which makes me a very difficult person to understand. And I have two identical clickers. One is for the laser pointer, I guess. Right. Terrible introduction. I think it's important to understand actually what the word Kaizen means. And the word Kaizen, or what we do, in fact, in general, is continuously improve and refine sort of the e-commerce activities of a client. We get deep down inside the nuts and bolts of what drives revenue, what drives conversion, what drives engagement. And if you sort of look at it like this, the red part is we have a whole bunch of costs. We spend a lot of money, a lot of salaries, a lot of marketing expense, a lot of infrastructure expense, and so forth and so on. And we need to maximize it, right? Quite often we take things into take things for granted. This is our website. It is what it is. And these are our landing pages. It is what it is. So I'm going to try to refine as much as I can my advertisement, my ads, my PPC, my emails, and so forth and so on. And what we do is really get into the nuts and bolts and to say, look, if you're making £1 million or $1 million or €1 million, why aren't you making 1.2 million out of all that expense? And so we work with clients to try to enhance that and to try to find the solutions with some form of reasoning, logic, and empirical data behind it to actually guide that path towards conversion, and especially to understand it. So basically, it's growing a little bit that funnel, right? And that's what we do. We've changed over the past few months. We've acquired a business in the United States, and now we're doing that transatlantically. So even though we think that the only differences between English and American is Z's and S's, and I think throughout the presentation you're going to see Z's and S's everywhere, the cultural shock has been quite significant. So the element of conversion optimization is, well, I'm going to try to build and paint a couple of pictures, and then I'll get back into the psychological side of things. But, oh, we got it right. If we're looking at this side of things, right, the ad, we understand this. This is the very traditional side of online marketing. We understand PPC because we've been doing it. If I compare it in dogs' years, it's for about 60 years, right? 8 times 7 is ish, right? And we definitely understand the other side. We understand revenue, because if we didn't understand revenue, we wouldn't understand how we would get paid, accountants wouldn't have a reason to live, and we wouldn't be able to calculate our bonuses. So we get that. The part that we actually take for granted and don't understand always very well is that bit in the middle, that first point of contact, that landing page, the website, how it interferes or gets in the way of our users and our visitors achieving the goals that we want them to get, the objectives that our sites have, how we monetize things. And quite often when we talk about conversion optimization, what are some of the buzzwords that we generally hear, right? I say conversion optimization, you say nothing. That's where, what do we say? CRO, yes, the acronym. It's like, yeah. What else do we hear? Is there a brand in particular, right, we talk about? We talk about Amazon, that has never had a fundamental redesign. They've always evolved incrementally. But we talk about things like split testing and A/B testing. We hear brands like Test and Target out of Adobe or Maximizer. Don't use them. Anybody uses Maximizer here? Raise your hands. Smart people in the room. All right, very good. And the idea is that from a technical perspective, we validate change without implementing change, right? We track it all the way down to a bunch of conversion goals, final e-commerce and bounce rates and user journeys, and then we benchmark it against the numbers, right? The changes that I made, how do they impact the elements of conversion? How did they impact the user journey? So that we have empirical numbers behind what we do. But that's just a technical validator. How we design the variation versus the control is where it becomes very difficult. How do I change my site? How do I change my pages? How do I change the way that I communicate with visitors? How do I redescribe better my products or services? How do I persuade better? And we can do this shit randomly all day long. They warned me. I said, Ivan, this is going to be recorded. Don't curse. Strike number 1. Okay. The whole element of conversion optimization isn't that technical validation part, the A/B testing and all these things. It's got nothing to do with it. It's just a very small part. The element of conversion optimization is how do I change behaviors, period. How do I get you to do more of something? How do I get you to see something? How do I get you to click on that instead of going, I don't get the page. I don't understand what I'm supposed to do. What the hell are you talking about? That's where conversion optimization lies. And it's a constant struggle and battle with all the marketers when we produce content, when we structure sites. And it's important to understand that for visitors, the equation is actually very simple. And there's this odd phenomenon that happens constantly when we have our sort of business hats on and we end up in these convoluted and twisted, completely politicized, sort of Dallas-style marketing and business meetings in our offices, where we don't think like a customer anymore. We don't think like a user anymore, right? And then when we're all at home and then we have to book our holidays online or our vacation, right, we look at things completely differently. 90% of decisions are completely subconscious. When you're in a marketing meeting, 95% of the annoyance is totally conscious. See, this is where the British sarcasm just completely fails in certain circumstances. So the most important thing, part of this whole equation that we're looking at, is understanding how we communicate value. How do we give people or visitors a reason to move forward in the user journey? And the elements of value have to be explained and communicated in very tangible, quantifiable elements. You need to benchmark why your product is better than another one, why your service can differentiate from the other services. You want to create the ingredients of that element of want. You also need to address the elements of benchmarking, the emotional benefits. How do I feel when I consume your product? All of those things, and if you don't do any of those, there's no point in having a beautiful website and spending a lot of money on marketing. The yang to that yin is the elements of cost. And cost, actually, people always attribute it to a financial component. But the reality is the financial component, the element of price, is actually a very positive element if presented behind a very strong value proposition. But the elements of perceived effort, for example, a crappy website with terrible navigation where you can't find information, incredibly long forms, convoluted search results, list modules you don't understand, instructions you can't fathom. All those elements of perceived effort and especially perceived risk. Are you the right supplier? Am I going to get what I want? What happens if I make wrong decisions? Create what we call a value fulcrum. And that element of value fulcrum is the one thing that you're continuously testing and tuning. On the left-hand side, you have all those elements of the value proposition and the incentive. And on the right-hand side, all the elements of friction and anxiety. And in order to get a person to do something, to move to the next stage, this side needs to outweigh that side. The very second that form is a little bit too complicated, you scare people off. The scale tips this way. You're not giving me a reason to continue. Exit rate, bounce rate, and drop-off rates. So the whole purpose of this was to highlight or try to focus on one particular component of that conversion equation, one that quite often is completely misconstrued and misunderstood. It's the one that we completely forget when we're in our marketing meetings. It's how we function as humans. And so I wanted to take a lot of key principles of sort of how the brain functions, how we consume information, and show how it applies to the elements of information acceptance, navigation, site architecture, just very quickly. And then we'll look at a lot of examples. This is the participative site. So if you thought that this was going to be a passive, you're actually going to be contributing to this. So I really need to know that everybody is awake before I fall asleep. So is everybody, yes, you're engaged? You're following so far? I see nods. Yes, a couple of people still on their smartphones. I swore many years ago I would never use this slide, but every time I ask this one question, right? Who does not know where this slide comes from, this picture comes? Raise your hands. Right? It's The Matrix. There's always somebody that has never seen The Matrix. The only movies Keanu Reeves has ever been really, truly good at. The Matrix trilogy. Best one was the second, but you know. But the reason why I show this slide is that we're all surrounded by numbers. In our day-to-day lives, we look at numbers. Numbers, numbers, numbers all the time. Right? Who looks at numbers every day? Right? Look around. Look how many people that is. Right? Well, you take your hands down to look around. It defies the point. But I started in a place like this working a long time ago, before Jeff Bezos launched his business plan in that little company called Amazon. I started in hotels. And what I really loved about hotels, or hated about hotels, was that you could see the customer actually consume the product in front of you, right? And it was an extraordinary experience. And one day I was at the reception desk, and this Greek guy flies in, and he's very late, and I check him in. And this was back in '97, right, in Czech Republic. Well, yes, the Czech Republic. And I know that he goes to this room, and he was very tired, and 25 minutes later, I see him come down the elevator. It was a glass elevator. His face was so red, I could see him through the glass elevator. And I was thinking to myself, holy shit, I'm in for a good one. Second time I curse, I really apologize. But it doesn't really count, because it was twice the same word, right? So, and he starts storming at the desk. And you know why he was storming at the desk? He was storming at the desk because he had called his family back in Greece to tell his family that he had landed safely and the hotel was fantastic. Then he checked his bill on the television. $9 a minute. 22 minutes. And as he came down to the desk, he's about to just grab me, and I thought he was going to headbutt me with his huge mustache. And I put a discount invoice in front of him. And his face immediately lights up, and he goes, "What's this?" I go, "You called your family to say that you had arrived safely, hadn't you?" He says, "Yes." "How did you know?" I said, "Well, it's all about caring. It's all about human behavior. It's all about, if you give a damn, you can anticipate. You can learn how to communicate." And that's what this slide is about. It's not understanding the numbers. It's understanding that behind the numbers, there's people. That when you have 1 million visitors and you have an exit rate of 93%, and you're looking at hundreds of thousands of minutes of wasted time. When you're converting very low, or when you're not getting people to the right goals, you're wasting people's time. So all this is about understanding people and caring. It's quite simple. One of the key elements is understanding the concept of perception. And the element of perception is, how do we formulate a mental image of a visual stimuli, right? And we all see the same things. You see the same slides. But the way that we process the visual information that we see is completely different from every single one of us. And the reason why is because the element of perception is designed and built not only based on what you see, but on how you process information. And we all process information in completely different ways, because of our education, because of our experience, because of our backgrounds, because of our physical attributes. If you say, "Look at that beautiful rose," and you happen to be colorblind, the perception of that beautiful rose is completely different. So what do you see? No, it's a question. A question begets an answer. What do you see? Say it out loud. Yeah, like at least we all agree, right? So imagine if this is your page. Imagine if this is your ad, something as simple as this, right? It's binary. I see a stork, I see a rabbit. Imagine how people perceive your price, how they perceive your marketing messages, how they digest your content, how they navigate through your pages, the feelings that they get. Millions and millions of different visitors, different perceptions. The element of attention is a fantastic one. It's akin to that of a laser. The fantastic element of attention is that it needs to be proactively given. It requires a lot of effort to give attention. My girlfriend reminds me of that every other day and whenever she has the chance to. Give me more attention. I was like, yeah, but did you see what's on television? Really cool. See, British sarcasm out of Frenchman's mouth with an American accent doesn't always work. But you know the expression limited attention span? Well, think about every single web page as being an environment where we have a limited reservoir of attention. If I expand that attention to absorb information, I expand that attention in the wrong place, I absorb the wrong information. So it is something that's very selectively given. A person that understood that very early on was the people over at Amazon. If you stick out your thumb like this and you look at your fingernail, that's what we call the quarter view. It's where your eyes see things in very precise high definition, right? It's about a couple of degrees of visual acuity. That's called the focal point. And that's why people at Amazon, little by little, evolve their sites to develop these little modules here, right? The focus point. This is in high resolution, and that's why we build clusters of information. Outside of that, we might perceive information. We'll call it low resolution, low standards. But outside of that environment, inside the margin, we see nothing. If we don't proactively give attention, well, the yin and the yang to that is perceptual blindness, not seeing something in plain sight. Now, you are the absolute worst people to make any form of judgment on your entire e-commerce environment. The worst. Because you're a little bit like a person that walks into your own flat and the lights went out. You can navigate to the patch box in a second. You don't need light to do that. You know where everything is. So how are you well equipped to be able to say, hey, this bit of information is in the wrong place. This piece of information is out of sequence. This element might not be perceived. Thus, I cannot allocate attention. Thus, I am blind to it. I know you don't believe me, so let's take a visual example. Listen, it's a business that does about 320 million pounds a year, right? Let's not laugh about that. Serious business. But it's also very easy to see where attention goes, right? Attention goes to the product, or products, pairs of products. And, of course, the call to action. But we all like money, and we're all in this business to convert, to make sales, to drive revenue. And so the element of perceptual blindness is actually having something that's in the completely wrong place, where the visual flow doesn't go to it, thus I don't pay attention. And when it's a competitive environment, and every single e-commerce environment that tries to drive revenue is a competitive environment nowadays, you can imagine that when the average transaction value is 38 pounds, when Christmas comes along, shipping can cost 10 to 12% of the transaction rate. So this probably affects 3, 4, 5 extra percentage points on conversion. So it's almost like that poker question, do you like money? Just by changing where you put this, where you put that incentive, near the call to action, would drive incremental add to carts, which drives incremental sales. Who's ever heard of this effect, the John Ridley Stroop effect? One person. Good, so you're going to help me read out the instructions. Because this is where it becomes this is where you join in. Oh, that's not good. These are your instructions. Can somebody read the instructions out for me? Right? Very simple instructions. As fast as you can, you're all going to unfold your arms to make sure that those vocal pipes are nice and cleared. And as fast as you can, a number of squares are going to appear, and as fast as you can, because this is measuring reaction time, you're going to yell out. Yell out, huh? It's embarrassing if you do it and then the person next to you doesn't do it. It's embarrassing for the person that doesn't do it, because you're all going to be doing this. Or we can spend the next 33 and a half minutes, right, just waiting for you to do this, right? So, as fast as you can, colors are going to appear, and you're going to scream out the color, right? Here we go. Are you ready? Are you ready? Yes. Here we go. Yes. A bit faster, huh? A bit. Blue, green, yellow, purple. Yeah, that blue and that purple. The color's out of sync, by the way. Just this is a great way of testing it. But yeah, the reflex was fairly quick, right? This is where it becomes a little bit pain in the... Can somebody read out the instructions for me? It's a simple 6-worded set of instructions, all right? A little bit like, if you've known the Firefox call to action, there's more words in that call to action than there are there. Say the color of the letters. Let's say it together now. Say the color of the letters. Say the color of the letters. Simple instructions, really, really. I promise you, there's no trap to this. So as fast as you can, tell me the color of the letters. Are you ready? Here we go. There we go. Ready? One more time. Faster. Yet when we sit down in our marketing meetings, we completely forget about the fact that John Ridley Stroop in 1935 discovered a very simple principle. That resolving the conundrum of two conflicting visual stimuli takes 350% more brain power to resolve. Oh my God, some people are going, shit, you see, damn, third time. No, please don't kick me out. Can you imagine, thinking back to your ad campaigns, your links, your PPC, imagine the calls to action, the site design, the content, some of the convoluted oppositions that we have, and how much neurological power, CPU energy, it actually takes to unravel. It takes us a lot of brain power to decompose a web page, to understand the information, to resolve the conflicts that constantly exist between the marketer on one side and the sales guy, the designer, and the tech boys that constantly bicker and argue. And that's what John Ridley Stroop tried to illustrate. And this is something that Samsung really don't understand. And let's take something very simple. We spoke about perception just a few seconds ago. Let's add that to this principle of conflicting interpretations. Here's a little bit of navigation here and here. Where do I start? We have a conflict. I'm thinking more about what's the purpose of this rather than discovering that element of the value proposition. Fair enough. Then let's interpret these words. We have fun, relationship, life task, and life care. If you're a smoker like me, you don't really care much about life, so I guess this navigation here doesn't really make much sense. Fun. What on God's earth does that mean? Right? The definition of fun is different for everybody. So what am I going to find behind this little nugget of information right here? Relationships. If you're married, if you're dating, you have a girlfriend, or you're single, again, the definition of that navigation little tidbit makes completely different senses to absolutely everybody. And the story goes on. I know they want it to be original, but you find yourself spending more time trying to figure out what the hell did he mean and what it means to you than actually engaging in a subconscious fashion with the navigation to discover information. It obviously doesn't get any better as we discover or try to randomly click on the navigation, right? Sound and shot. What the hell are you thinking? You know, shot time. Right? But it goes on. Let's add another layer of navigation up here, but just make sure that you can only understand what that navigation is when you hover over it, right? So where's my focal points going? Where's my attention going? It's all over the place, and it's actually spent on trying to unravel what the hell is going on, leaving very little energy to absorb information. Next cognitive principle that's very much misunderstood is this little game that we're going to play. Very pragmatic game. I suggest you play this game at your next marketing meeting by having coins in your pockets and just randomly throwing out a number of coins on the tables. Hopefully there isn't somebody that's faster than you and snatches your change. But the principle is very simple. There's a number of little circles that are going to appear, and as fast as you can, you're going to tell me how many circles appear, right? Fair enough? Simple set of instructions. Are you ready? Oh, I know you're not. Are you ready? Here we go. I'm a bit faster. What happened? Can somebody explain what happened up here? Trying to count, as opposed to what happened when it was 2 or 3. Exactly. What's this? Oh, let me do it. It's a reflex, right? It's a reflex. And that's what happened between 4, 5, 6 for people, depending on how much you like to shoot craps. No gamblers here. That would have killed in a gaming conference. And anything above that. Basically, what happens is that it's a reflex decision. Reflex decision is processed quasi-subconsciously, instantly. And staying in that realm of subconscious, especially when it comes to preliminary decision-making, navigational components, is absolutely essential. The phenomenon that you saw beyond 6 or 7 is that you actually need to take that snapshot, break it down, physically count it, recompose an answer, and then spit that answer out. Think of John Ridley Stroop and the elements of more conflicting stimuli. Here, another element, another layer of effort that's begotten. So, let's play that again. Are you ready? Same principle, spots, count them, answer them as fast as you can. Are you ready? I know. You ready? There you go. Faster. 2002 voted ugliest dog in the world, right? Nobody's going to disagree with that. But what is this example showing? This example is showing something you as marketers do absolutely every day. What's that? Distraction. It's distraction. And it's distraction because I gave you exactly the same set of instructions. Exactly the same. Just like a marketing ad would, right? We spend a lot of time tuning our PPC and our affiliate links and all these things. And those are like little promises. They're like little instructions of what you're going to find behind it. But what we do is, on that first point of contact, we change the rules. We put the world's ugliest dogs. We overlap stuff. Change the colors of the spots. We put them in unpredictable areas. And all of a sudden, what becomes reflex becomes calculated. And calculated requires what? A hell of a lot more energy. And these are the types of reflexive decisions that you're trying to make, right? Especially when it comes to navigation. If I say man, you say? Oh, God. Jeez, really? If I say man, you say? If I say right, you say? If I say up? If I say I'm booking a return flight or a single, right? Those are reflex decisions. You almost don't need to think, and everything remains in that subconscious layer for as long as you don't need to be consciously absorbing that information around the product, the value proposition. You want to be keeping it in that subconscious environment. Navigation, right? Let's take another example. Navigation. How many times the marketers go, we have so many things to sell. Now, I know the guy clicked on a very specific PPC ad that was so targeted that he's actually probably looking for just 1 or 2 products, but here's my navigation. And where these key principles apply are when you're trying to fix and redesign that navigation and say, it is easier to process 4 or 5 items at a time in a sequence than it is to go, holy, I was going to get my 4th strike, right? But here, right, you might have a 2-tier collapsible navigation or even a 3-tier collapsible navigation. And those are the things that you try to explore when you understand how the brain works, when the environment that you're trying to stay at, the level that you're trying to stay at, is actually quite clear. Understanding how we solve problems, scientific problems, personal problems, is actually very important in the way that we construct value proposition, how we construct information. And what I mean by that is there's a stream of studies that came out of Pittsburgh University in 1981. And that stream of studies was called Experts versus Novices, and it should appear just about now. Yes, there you go. And the concept of experts versus novices was that in certain types of domains, experts have a very particular way of organizing and structuring thought to resolve a problem, as opposed to novices, who are known for shallow thought, the top-level little key features that I utilize to solve that problem. And we do this all the time. We're experts in certain fields. We're novices in certain fields. And the way that we construct that information is very different to resolve a problem. So let's take the example. Now, don't freak out, all right? But this is how experts, physicists, resolved the explanation of what an inclined plane is, a table that tilts, and how things can slide off it. And all it illustrates is how thought is organized for true scientists, experts, the utilization of Newton's theories, etc., versus novices. If we had to explain an inclined plane, we'd probably structure it like this. Here's the plane, here's the block, here's the length of the table, the properties of the wood or marble or metal, and that's how we would explain how something has a propensity to slide off a table. But what I want to illustrate through this is that we think and organize information very differently. Yet the way that we construct our content, our marketing, is always the same for everything. We don't really look at the users and say, you know what? Yes, I have segmentation. I look at analytics, and I say, well, I have people coming from PPC, and I've got people coming from affiliate, and I've got people doing this, and I've got new versus returning. But do we have some form of metric and understanding of these guys know their shit and these guys don't? No. We have a same content management system for everything. And generally, the person that's going to write content for one writes the content in exactly the same way for the other. What this example illustrates is, at the top, we have a collectible stamp that's 15 pounds. Who would buy that? An expert or a novice? Anybody? It would be a novice, right? 15 pounds, it would be a novice. Yet the content structure and actually the physical attributes and the explanations are exactly built in the same way as a pound that's worth 47,000 pounds. At the cart. Pay with American Express Black, get a free airplane ticket while you're at it, right? But the information is exactly the same. Yet we understand that people don't construct a thought process or require the same types of information depending on whether they're experts or novices. And yet this is a retail site. Imagine if you're selling business services versus retail services, right? We see this in broadband environments, for example. The explanations are exactly constructed in the same way. The attributes are the same. I'd even say that the business side is a hell of a lot more fluffy than the retail side. And the examples go on and on. Finally, it's the element of risk, how we interpret and understand risk. And consumers are ridiculously irrational. Who's ever heard of Dan Ariely? Raise your hand, right? He researches consumer behavior over in the United States at MIT, amongst other areas, and I absolutely recommend his book, Predictably Irrational, from which this comes from. What I truly love about this example is not the actual elements, but how it was executed on the campus. And basically, what he did was that he sold Hershey Kisses versus Lindt doors. Who's ever had a Hershey Kiss? Raise your hands. Who's ever had two of them? Brave. Who's ever had a Lindt door? Raise your hand. Allez. Who's ever had a whole box full? Fantastic. So you can absolutely understand the pricing. On one hand, we have 1 cent, and on the left-hand side, on the other side, we have 15 cents. So I ask you a very simple, pragmatic question. What was the percentage distribution of sales? Sold it to 500 or 600 students. You could only buy one at a time. What was the distribution of sales between the Hershey Kiss and the Lindt door? Venture a couple of numbers. 20? 20-80. Anybody else? 80-20. I'm sorry. All right. The elements of that perceived quality were very high, and because right now we're staying in an environment of, yes, there is that financial transaction. So let's be incredibly rational. We're going to discount prices by 1 cent. Fair enough? So if we discount things by 1 cent, it's 0 cents on the left and 14 cents on the right. What happened to the distribution of numbers, of sales? Somebody did it with their hands. Go ahead. Even with a projector in my eyes, I can see everything that's happening. And yes, your appointment won't be late for lunchtime. They flipped. That's exactly right. The numbers absolutely flipped because one thing happens with the element of free. The element of free actually types into the single emotion that drives every single decision we make absolutely all the time. And for those that really say, no, Ivan, love rules the world, I beg to differ that risk can overrule all emotions. And it continuously drives all the decisions that we make. Is this the right product? What happens if I bought it right? Is this the right hotel? Am I leaving on the right dates? What happens if I need to cancel my flight? Should I go for a job promotion? Should I actually raise my hand because I'm really scared in this conference? Should I actually debate the pros and the cons at this meeting? How will I be perceived? Everything we do is constant fear. So all that said, how do we create an environment that we can solve these problems, right? And the approach is, how do I explain that element of value? And there's two sides to that coin. You have to understand that in order to communicate value and bring in and utilize all of these principles of how we absorb information, it is through the management of thought sequence. We don't operate in a world where, well, we could try, but us as humans can't absorb multiple sources of information. Especially guys have a tendency of being able to do one thing at a time. And the way that we absorb information is a little bit like a story. We can't read 6 or 7 chapters simultaneously of a book. We read them in sequence. So the element of designing a thought process, a thought sequence, or a script is actually very old school. And that's what we're going to look at. Every single page, and including every single component of a web page, including your ads, have to follow a sequence. But a web page, for example, has to have that ability, has to absolutely position an individual and say, hey, remember that ad? You are at the right place. It's an introduction. It's the welcome at the door. You are here where you're supposed to be. And that's the elements of positioning. You have to start defining your products and the key product attributes, but you don't go into full details. You start engaging a visitor and developing a dialogue so that you can start addressing the questions that he wants answered. So you have to figure out, and you know, we spend a lot of time literally writing almost a scenario or a script. What are we going to say on our web page? How am I going to present the product? Do you present the product features, the product differentiators? Do you start with the product imagery? How do you do it? If you're talking about a hotel, it's going to be completely different than, say, a broadband package. Do you start saying it's 20% off? If I don't know what 20% off is on, then there's really no point in having that incentive first. So everything is a thought process. It's a sequence. You're basically telling a story. On the other side, there is no point in having a story if visual design can't come in to guide the eye flow through that storyline. Now, we saw how attention gets focused in key areas, right? And where that attention gets focused, it needs to be guided through that story so you can read the story in the right order. Simple. It's not difficult to see where the attention is going to be going, right? I put a red dot there. It's like a Pollock painting, worth perhaps a little bit less. But the eye goes right there. And the idea of visual design is I go get those markers that attract visual attention that pulls you through a storyline. Fair enough. Unfortunately, this is how we have a tendency of designing our web pages. Equally weighted items, content that's hidden, links just about everywhere, and if you're Samsung, you're really absolutely lost. The idea of design is actually to manage eye flow with all the techniques that we know, and we'll talk about certain of those examples, but color contrast and hierarchy, position, and all those elements, so that I can guide that individual through that storyline to the punchline and the conclusion. The whole concept of above the fold is nowadays especially completely false. And if you say, we will lose money if we don't build everything above the fold, you're absolutely wrong. All this is to say that you can actually manage attention. You can manage where the eyes go, right? It might take you a couple of seconds to realize that the word direction is here, but in a heartbeat, I can make you look at it in an absolute split second. And the ability to manage eye flow through the right storyline is the goal of that conversion optimization exercise. So we're going to run through a lot of these examples where we apply some of these key principles. One is the ability to position that visitor. So, for example, if I click on this ad and I arrive at a page like this, I have no idea where I'm at. Where are my eyes going? My eyes are going in just about any frenetic direction. It's trying to grasp at little bits of content to go, where am I? That click costed 12 pounds, right? So that's a lot of money. You better be investing in positioning and telling a story. But where's the storyline here? What's the goal of this page? Where does attention go? Well, attention it flutters a little bit all over the page, but it sort of stays in the top left corner going, what the hell am I looking at? Sort of true. So it's not about, geez, I got a bad performance result because my marketing was so poor. It has nothing to do with it. The reality is that you didn't care. You didn't greet the person at the door. You didn't build in any content. You didn't say, you know what, relax with your eyes. Let me guide you through a little positioning statement. And something as simple as saying, match predictions from experts, tipsters, and where to find the best odd and bonus combos. This is where you are and what you're going to benefit from, put in 2 simple sentences. Built into 2 visual cues to say, this is how you interpret the information. Why? Because I give a damn. And because I care, I'm going to try to guide you through that story and give you that quick little visual cue to say, this is how you use the page. And you can see that I get more attention and I can control the attention through that storyline just a tad bit easier. That means that I can absorb that information a little bit better. And if I can guide a little bit more visitors through that storyline a little bit more intelligently and they read the right information in the right sequence, the likelihood of driving clicks where they matter is going to increase. Remember when we spoke a little bit early on about that give me value, right? Describe that value. Give me a reason to click throughout the entire user journey. Well, let's take another example that costs a hefty amount of money. I apologize. I have 14 poker accounts, and I love gambling examples because, you know, they fling around so much cash. It's unbelievable. So making fun of them it's just a joy, really. Online casino reviews, right? That's about a good tenner a click. Where do I land? Well, Casino.com, I think, was sold for something like 10 million pounds a few years back. It's a great environment to make a lot of affiliate revenue, of course. But what visitors want is what? What's in it for me? The concept of value that's going to actually drive me to click and pursue that user journey. Let's try to find the value. Somebody let me know if you find any value. Right? I mean, yes, there's imagery and all that, and, well, we're not idiots when it comes to content. So we might start looking at the information, and, you know, relatively new site, highly entertaining. Really? I mean, you saw the description of the component of value. It needs to be tangible, it needs to be specific, it needs to be quantifiable, it needs to be benchmarked, it needs to explain what the benefits are, what the differentiators are. Where? Tell me where. This is just an incentive, right? An incentive isn't value. You don't buy a value, you don't buy an incentive, you buy a value proposition, right? You don't buy a discount. Discount on something that's really, really bad, not to use a word that's a little bit ruder, is still a discount on something that's just, you know, crap. We want to understand what the value of the product is. So, what is the thought sequence? What is the script to the individual modules? And then how do I guide visual attention through these modules? There's my control module. How about I actually try to create that element of tangibility? How about I try to create that element of benchmark? That I try to bring in quantifiable elements so that I can substantiate the environment and give a person a reason to go, I can relate with that. The elements of quantifiability and as well the elements of value with visual cues to pull you through that storyline and actually a heading-subheading combination, which is very important to position what that key module content is going to be about. Innovative 3D casino games with high payouts. I know exactly what this site stands for. Quantifiable components and jackpots that says, you know what, this is no little tiny casino. Fantastic. It starts giving me and painting a picture and giving me the attributes to understand what the purpose of this is. Maybe I change the storyline and try a different storyline, pros and cons. Because when we describe and explain content or products or services, thinking that we can describe something for people to believe that it's absolutely perfect is a fallacy. How does that change in terms of the management of attention? You can see that as the design progresses, we can model and manage the way eye flow goes through that storyline. The more people I get through my storyline, the bigger the reason they will have to click. Without the beginning of that story, there is no point in taking an action. I'm going to skip through this example because I'll be finished in 7.5 minutes. And I'll walk you through one last example. An example that did not harm any designers in the process because no designers were used. Are there any designers here? So why didn't that not make anybody laugh? I mean, designers are absolutely overpaid and they think they come at the beginning of a site redesign. No, 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 no. You come at the end of a site design. This is the ad promise. Everybody know who Travelzoo is, right? International, many countries and so forth. And this is a terrific ad. It's £2 and up. Now, coach means bus. Yes, I just want to make sure that coach, bus. And it's a £2 coach seat sale, basically. It's basically saying go to any 2 cities in the UK and you'll get a ticket for that route for about £2. It actually gives you visual examples right here. Leeds to Manchester. Why would somebody leave Leeds to go to Manchester? I don't know. But, you know, who supplies it, and here's your call to action. You really prepare that individual for a great landing page and great experience, of course. Where am I? Find our lowest fares. Panic starts setting in. I said, well, wait a minute. You promised me £2 sale. Great deal. Where is it? I don't know. I really don't know. All of a sudden, your bounce rates start racking up because you didn't position that individual in the early signs of the story. Then, of course, you don't understand how information is consumed. People don't like blocks of text, right? Your eye cannot pick up salient elements and focus on them. But your storyline is completely wrong. And the reason why it says here and here, it says, if you can't find the destinations, click here. I haven't gone to that. See, wrong button. I haven't gone to that part of the storyline yet. I haven't been able to pick up the to and froms. What is this to and from here? What am I going to find when I click on the drop-down? Am I going to find names of streets, tube stations? Am I going to find neighborhoods? Am I going to find cities? What am I going to find? It says select and select. But aren't these supposed to be reflex decisions? Stating the obvious and not having to process that information? Let's look at the second line. Choose your journey type, single or return. I carries momentum. If I'm looking from left to right, my eyes actually carry momentum. Getting that direction to change, left to right, top to bottom, and left to right again, requires energy. It's not easy to do. You want to push momentum. And then here's another example of that reflex decision. And then, of course, we have this sort of strategic marketing meeting where all the heads of departments are sitting down and going, right, we're going to launch this massive £2 million campaign for our UK £2 coach seat sale, £2 bus seat sale. Adapting it culturally here. And then somebody raises his hand and says, well, let's add a train, because that's specific to my offer. Or better yet, let's make sure that we leave the navigation. There's always a social media guy. I mean, who invites the guy at every single meeting and go, add the module? And then there's that marketer that struck a deal. And he struck a deal with Booking.com, and he goes, I know we're trying to sell our products, but let's try to distract people from the user experience, because if we can get 1 million people to click on this, we'll make a whole £175. Good job. How about we start modifying things just a tad, just a little bit, and say, you know what, I care, so I'm going to help you. I'm going to tell you where you've arrived. Ha-ha, I am in the right place. Good. So now let's spend a little bit more time reading the rest of the content. Let's try to think of those reflex decisions and try to make sure that people understand the purpose of every little component so that I don't have to think about it. So a decision still remains an unconscious decision as opposed to a conscious decision. Select your departure city. If I click down on the drop-down, what am I going to find? A list of cities. Very good. Oof. How about the next piece? Eyes carry momentum, right? Left to right, linear structure. But if I see the word single here, what's the option next to it? Return. If I had return here, what is naturally the option that's next to it? Single. Everything becomes a reflex. Thusly, the momentum is very fast. I expend very little energy in processing this, and I can actually see my lowest prices as opposed to see my rates. How about we push that design a little bit and we understand how we bring in quantifiable, tangible benefits to the user so that I can quantify the offer, so that I understand that the UK coach seat sale is not just on 20 routes or 5 routes, but on hundreds of routes. That means that it's worth my effort because I will probably find a great deal. And you build it out in quantifiable terms. How about now, once I've built my script and my storyline, that option, that fail-safe, is put after the primary call to action. If I can't find my destinations here or here, I still have the option not to lose the individual. Now, if we remember the original Travel Zoo ad, why not bring in the benchmarks? By bringing in these components of benchmarks here, we do a miracle thing. If we didn't have this element here, and I clicked on the button, and I saw prices of £3, £4, £5, I get very upset. I go, wait a minute, you cheated me. You said it was a £2 sale. What's going on? But by priming or price anchoring at the beginning here, I'm saying, okay, I get this. All right, I'm setting parameters for a greater range of prices that I'm willing to accept. I go, there's my £2, but for £2.50, I can still do a very long trek, and I'll be ready for greater prices, which means that my reaction to the search results will not be the same at all. One is a negative one is a positive one. Then, of course, we have the little visual cue that pushes you back and tries to manage the eye flow into the set of instructions that you're supposed to apply. Finally, I don't have any more marketing meetings. I get rid of all the other guys in the room. I get rid of the navigation. This is a coach, a bus sale, not a train sale. Get rid of the social media side of things. Purify the page. And this is your before, and this is your after. You don't need a designer to do this. You simply need to care. That's it. It's as simple as that. And something like that reduces your bounce rate quite significantly, which means that it improves your revenue quite significantly. So that's it. This is sort of our pay and pray model. You can do things, randomly. You can decide to say, I need an extra 100 grand to bump up my marketing, or I need 200 grand to redesign a component of my site, and then launch it, and then squeeze all the body parts as tight as you can and pray that the results are going to be there. Or you look at the optimization route, which is a sort of low level of effort, low-cost process of testing in the real environment all these assumptions that are designed and built to try to resolve both the human problems and the technical problems. So there you go. Thanks for putting up with me and my terrible sense of humor and being participative. Thank you. Are there any questions? Is everybody eager to have meetings or go to... Yes?
So you made this example of Samsung, and I have an issue with it. Samsung's core market for cell phone use is through retailers like Vodafone, AT&T, Rogers.
Sure.
They're not really interested in selling that type of phone directly to consumer, right? Their bigger business is to sell through their brand. So they want more brand awareness of the product. So when you go to the mobile phone store, you go, oh, do you have that phone?
Yeah.
So how can you use that as an example of a poor performing page when that's not their core audience? That's not their core method there.
Sure, it might not be their core method, but then why bother having a website?
Brand awareness.
So why not just put the logo? Just show the product. Because you got to also look at the rest of your market and how people function. If you look at the Sony Xperia Z page, the Nokia 920 and the way that the Nokia 925 was manufactured and then sold, everything is based on key features, usability, applications. And a person decides to buy a product, yes, because, well, there's the brand power to it. But certainly it's not going to be 100% of your profitability to only benchmark things on brand. And brand are based on foundation components, just like Apple, for example, builds fantastically good, robust products. And we understand the build quality of an Apple phone without debating it. We understand its usability without debating it because we've interacted with it. So, no, I disagree. I think that in order to select a product, especially when you're in the primary research phases, there's a lot of boxes that you need to tick. Just like when you're going to be selecting, say, a car rental supplier, you want to make sure that you are in the top 3 brands that you're going to select to buy a product. And the elements of understanding what the product does, how it's built, how it interacts, how it changes your life, what your buddies are going to be buying as well, of course, affects the selection of that product. So if that were true, and it is partially true, and I completely agree that depending on the retail environment, it will change. And by the way, if you're selling 100 phones, you're not going to pick up and analyze 100 phones. You're going to pick up and analyze maybe 5 or 6 phones. So what do you do to be one of the 5 products that you're going to be picked up? That's my 2 cents. Anybody else?
Designers in the loop and how to make them more useful in this whole procedure and have them in the process from the beginning and not making them feel left out.
Involve the designer in the user research cycle. Now, I'm not talking about like lab testing, right? I hate lab testing. It doesn't work and it gives you bad results. But if you involve the designer, and we do that as early as we can, in understanding how consumers interpret information. When we do the visitor research side, what is the mindset a visitor comes in with? How does a visitor interpret your information content? How does a visitor interpret the facts about your products or services? You involve them earlier on, and then they start accepting the fact that they're there to support and manage the script, and you you work with them very early on for that, then it's a fantastic way of doing it. Then they will, of course, constantly bitch, going, oh, your page is too long, you think, it's up to you to manage. You know, page length is a very easy argument to resolve. But yeah, bringing them on as early as possible, breaking down what a product is, how it gets interpreted, and at the user stage cycle. So everything from, you know, giving them things like heat maps and session recordings and getting them involved in that aspect as early on as possible, as opposed to putting them in a closet and yes. That's it. Do we have time for a question? We had 2 questions. 1 question? She's far prettier than you are. So why don't you go ahead and ask your question?
Could you repeat your question in the microphone so everybody can hear it? Okay. So you were talking about, you know, mentioning in the page, in the web page, like what we offer customers, like what value propositions, and you also mentioned, you know, why is your product better, creating ingredients of want, but also emotional benefits. Can you just bring up a kind of example of emotional benefits and what you meant by that? Just
how it make if you buy insurance products, right? It's the emotional benefit is how it makes you feel to be covered, fully covered, well covered by an award-winning, 3 times consecutive chosen by you switch insurance supplier. It's that element of reducing that risk. Okay. It might be if you're selling, for example, travel products or adventure products, right? The elements of acceleration. So it might be a track day or something like that. So it's how you can actually explain and, you know, the emotional side of things. So there's the anti-risk component of the emotion, and it's the enjoyment of the product emotional component. It's not the primary point to focus on, by the way. And you need to, it depends on the product and the environment. Broadband, right? No emotion. Travel, romantic getaways, you know, cars. If you look at how copywriting effects, for example, is used used more or less well, but in many cases, the style of copywriting or the persuasion architecture used benches on a lot of these elements of emotion.
Okay, thanks a lot.
That's it. Sorry. Thank you very much.